Hello again, everyone. This is a new time-lapse of a stream. In this case, I took a sketch that I had from my sketchbook, and this was about a 30-minute sketch, and I turned it into a Gameboy Advanced Resolution image, and now I'm replicating it in an isometric perspective. These blue lines and red lines that you're seeing are my isometric line guides. Isometric perspective in computers is slightly different from isometric perspective in the real world because of the angles of the pixels. So I'm getting those lines as reference to make sure that I keep all my lines inside of that. And except for the floor near lines, I actually am quite spot on the perspective on the sketch. I was lucky in that sense. So I'm starting by building the bounding boxes of objects, right? So the bookshelves that I have are actually quite boxy, so that's easy. And here on the mantelpiece for the fireplace, that's also quite easy to replicate because, again, we're dealing with box-shaped volumes. If it was something that was not a box, I would probably just start out by creating the silhouette or defining the bounding space and then maybe doing that in a way to get the bounding box to work. Here I'm explaining how the archway is actually going to deform, and I do a skew as a way to speed up the process by getting a round selection, stroking it with one pixeled line, and then just deforming it according to the perspective. And I'm using the bookshelf top lines as a reference for that. And that's the same way actually that I build in the archway for the door, and I build the rest of the doors out of there. So this is my basic volume for the whole scene. And despite this looking very simplistic, let's not forget that the floor will have floorboards and there will be other objects such as a table at the center of the scene as well. So I'm creating a very basic a very basic shading method here by just putting in dark and light values according to the faces of the objects, and that's why boxes are a really good way to start anything, because the shading of a box is very straightforward. If the surfaces are flat and the light is far away, you're going to get flat colors in each of the surfaces. So the trick I'm using here is I'm drawing the near edge of these objects a brighter tone than the brightest face, which means that I'm getting a reflection on that edge, right? And you can do that on the near edges, on the far edges as well, but usually I let the far edges be really dark so that they create this separation between the objects, so that the fireplace, for example, is separate from the bookshelves by that dark outline that is there. The dark outline between the top of the chimney and the mantelpiece, I'm going to change that later on. For the bookshelves, I create the shape for the shelves themselves, and then I create this sort of random shape of books, and I actually take that shape and replicate it across, creating this sort of book pattern from where I then can pick parts of it to put it on the shelves. And I actually realized that I can just put them on a sort of a layer mask and actually randomly just shift them around, and they will still look, half decent. These shelves I had to shade differently because they are facing a different way, and I should have darkened the books as well, but I honestly felt that the books weren't even really getting any sort of direct light, so to speak. I'm using the same technique here. That was actually Anna Hollandrake, a game artist and illustrator that I once did an avatar for. Not an avatar, I did full body drawing. So this is me just going in and adding those breaks on the floorboards, and I'm kind of finding ways to represent the perspective of the floorboards by being broken apart. And looking at this now, I think the floorboards are far too green for what I wanted, but I did want to have this scene completely dusty and mossy, and because there's a tree growing in, and I actually addressed the tree in the room. So in this case, the technique I'm using is I'm just creating shapes using the lasso tool set to pixelated or not anti-aliased. And I create that light side shape, and as I'm doing the selection, I'm trying to get some texture on it by doing sort of a squiggly line. And then I come in with a tone that is in between the two, and I kind of fill that in to make the transition softer. I'm using the same technique here for the leaves. I'm just drawing shapes of leaves, and then I lock the transparency of that layer and I paint brighter tone inside the leaf. Now I'm drawing the table, and you can kind of see me trying to get the corners here a little bit more rounded so that they don't make the table look too sharp and too brand new, because it's supposed to be either old or worn out table. Also get the shape here for the legs. There's a little appendix there for like a lock piece. And it doesn't really get, it doesn't really look that well to begin with, but then I kind of darken the outlines to separate the table from the scene a bit more. And I start really realizing that outlines is actually quite a big piece of this art style. So it's a big element of this visual art style. So I add that to the tree as well. It's not completely, like I wanted. I don't think the tree looks that good, or at least it looks like it was cut from another image and put into this one, because I don't think the contrasts are right considering what I have. But I push forward anyway, because I would rather see a completed image, or semi-completed image, so that I can get a better idea of how things interact with each other, rather than try and fix details, because that's technically what it is, fix details before it is time to fix the details. So here I'm adding texture to the walls because they're very flat in comparison to all the details that we're starting to get, both with the trees and the books on the bookshelf, as well as the planks on the ground. So I'm trying to get the walls to look both cracked and stained at the same time, as well as have this sort of daub texture, like it's flaking off, but just have it like really noisy and interesting. There's still a couple of deer heads that I haven't put on the wall, but they were part of the original sketch. And now I'm adding some sort of brick texture detail onto the surfaces of the mantelpiece and the chimney from the fireplace. I also added these sort of fungi growing on the tree just because I think it makes it look a little bit more interesting, and I'm fixing the color for the leaves. So this is basically what it ended up looking like, and I'm going to continue working on this on subsequent streams, but I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope to see you again. Take care.